Welcome back to Diaspora's Media. We got a special here for you today, man. So we're gonna hop right into it. The United Nations had a general assembly on Wednesday as member states adopted a resolution declaring the transatlantic slave trade the gravest crime against humanity. Right, this made a lot of people mad. We're gonna dive into this a little bit today, and then hopefully discuss um, further what this could possibly mean. Right. So here it says, um, let's do this. So it says the resolution spearheaded by Ghana received 123 votes in favor. Three countries, Argentina, Israel, and the United States, voted against, and 52 abstained, right? So, you know what? Let's go ahead on and zoom in a little bit more on this, right? So, today we come together in solemn solidarity to affirm truth and pursue a route to healing and reparative justice, said Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama, speaking ahead of the vote on behalf of the 54 member African group, the largest regional bloc at the UN. By the way, I just want to say, right? I just want to say the room was almost empty, right? The room was almost empty. This did not get the kind of media coverage or even presence that it deserved. But let's continue, right? Stolen, shackled, and shipped, right? For more than 400 years, millions of people were stolen from Africa, put in shackles, and shipped to the New World to toil in cotton fields and sugar and coffee plantations under scorching heat and the crack of the whip, right? That's part of what the transatlantic slave trade was for, right? The transatlantic slave trade was about labor. But one of the largest things that it was responsible for was for medical experimentation. We would not have, right, the modern medical industry. We would not have modern science if there wasn't an unmitigated practice of all kinds of clandestine scientific, um, you know, practices that were able to get a lot of data from the backs of enslaved Africans and enslaved Native Americans. So, denied their basic humanity and even their own names, they were forced to endure generations of exploitation with repercussions that reverberate today, including persistent anti Black racism and discrimination. The resolution emphasized the trafficking of enslaved Africans and racialized chattel enslavement of Africans as the gravest crime against humanity by reason of the definitive break in world history, scale, duration, systemic nature, brutality, and enduring consequences that continue to structure the lives of all people through racialized regimes of labor, property, and capital. There are spirits of the victims of slavery present in this room at this moment, and they are listening for one word only: justice. Esther Phillips, first poet laureate of Barbados, right? Address wrongs, support reparations. It affirmed the importance of addressing historical wrongs affecting Africans and people of the diaspora in a manner that promotes justice, human rights, dignity, and healing, while emphasizing that claims for reparations represent a concrete step towards remedy, right? So you guys can read this a little bit more later on, right? But this particular piece of this story, right, specifically right here, right, it affirmed the importance of addressing historical wrongs affecting African people of the diaspora in a manner that promotes justice, human rights, dignity, and healing, while emphasizing that claims for reparations represent a concrete step towards remedy, right? This is going to be difficult. This is going to be difficult. So not only did three nations deny, this claim, right? The United States, Israel, Argentina. Argentina, we all know Argentina was the safe haven of several Nazis after after they were kicked out of Germany and defeated. So that's no surprise there. America, no surprise there. Argentina, or Israel, I'm sorry, no surprise there, right? These are not surprising countries to block this. This is a very interesting thing, but we're not surprised, right? However, the tension that has arisen, right? And we spoke a little bit about this during the diaspora wars or a psyop, is how will these reparations be distributed across imperial nations, across imperial empires that may not exist anymore, but may exist as countries, right? You have Africa that was separated by so many, countries. You have Francophone, you have Anglophone, right? You have Brussels, you have you have what's the other one? I can't remember. You have the Portuguese, right? You have the Dutch, right? You have so many groups of people. And then you have America, right? I was raised in America, but I have no blood ties to American slavery, right? Does that mean I don't deserve reparations? Absolutely not. The British enslaved and colonized my country, right? So I can't ask for reparations from an American government. Is there going to be, a proxy situation, right? Like how will this be distributed? How can we actually do that, right? And that's really what the brainstorming should be. Is how exactly are we going to distribute this, right? And how will the wealth gaps, the wealth disparities, how will the redistribution of wealth be given to the sons, daughters, grandsons, granddaughters of colonialism, of transatlantic slave trade, and of the larger whole that is in this diaspora? That redistribution is very complex. Furthermore, the United States does not recognize a legal right to reparations for historical wrongs that were not illegal under international law at the time they occurred. Right? Great, obvious America, right? It was legal, so therefore it's all right. A grave human rights violation. The horrors of slavery echoed in the General Assembly Hall as member states commemorated the International Day to remember its victims. The slave trade and slavery stand among the greatest violations of human rights in human history, in affront to the very principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, themselves born in part from these injustices of the past, said the Assembly President Annalena Baerbock. The countries where enslaved Africans were taken from also suffered a hollowing out, having lost entire generations who potentially could have helped them to prosper. It was, to put in colder terms, mass resource extraction, right? Mass resource extraction. So are they talking about people here, right? Because the resource extraction never ceased, right? The resource extraction never ceased. We see that all over Africa. We see that all over the entire continent. So let's persist. Remove persistent barriers. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for confronting slavery's lasting legacies of inequality and racism. Now we must remove the persistent barriers that prevent so many people of African descent from exercising their rights and realizing their potential. So now, what does this mean? Again, these are interesting and very powerful words, and I do credit the United Nations for what they've done so far, right? Like, this is a very important assembly. This is a dub, right? This is a dub. But now the question is, how does the diaspora, rather than turning on each other, especially with what we see with the FBA movement, with what we see with ADOS, the delineation of Black Americans, very many names for it, right? Whether it's Tariq Nasheed, Dennis Sperling, so many people. Shout out to Neferkari Dessalines, and shout out to Afro Think Tank, right? They had some interesting takes on this, but again, I understand delineation. I'm not fully against delineation. I think it has its drawbacks in a lot of ways, but I'm not fully against it. I think it can be important. However, when it comes to holding African nations accountable, that's a bit more difficult, right? Especially because of the concept of slavery that was had then, right? In the context that it was. But holding European nations accountable, this is huge. Holding the American nation accountable, this is huge, right? But the question is, again, what will this redistribution of resources look like? Is it going to be something that people can actually go to their governments for, right? So let's read a little bit more. He urged countries to use them to drive action to eradicate systemic racism, right? Ensure reparatory justice, and accelerate inclusive development marked by equal access to education, health, employment, housing, and safe environment. Okay, those are a little bit more tangible, but far bolder actions by many more states are needed, right? This includes commitments to respect African countries, ownership of their natural resources. There we go. And steps to ensure their equal participation and influence in the global financial architecture and the UN Security Council, right? No peace without reparatory justice. The poet laureate of Barbados, Esther Phillips, read from some of her works, including a piece about a young girl walking on the grounds of former sugar plantation and not understanding its historical significance as her ancestors buried there look on. There are spirits of the victims of slavery present in this room at this moment, and they are listening for one word only: justice. Because of them and for the world, there can be no peace without justice, right? No justice, no peace. And so from now, as we continue, we should really dive into some questions about what will this look like? What will reparations look like? Will all countries that were involved be involved in the restoration and reparative justice of this? What does this look like? And I think as we continue, this is something that we should definitely discuss. So look out on more content, especially with the professor regarding this. I think you guys will really like it. But I'm Victor Muthama. This was a video. We're looking to drop a whole bunch more. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share. And we are out.